Well, hello everybody. Welcome to WordCast number 59. We're doing this again. Yeah, we missed a couple weeks. We're sorry about that. Several reasons, including him being sick, so you can get mad at him about that. But, it happens, whatever. So we're back, and of course we decided to come back on the biggest week of tech news, basically, in history. So this
I wouldn't say history.
I mean, of PC hardware news, let's put it that way, okay? It's a big time.
Of the last few months' history.
I mean, I'd say...
Because, realistically, one of the second biggest topic is not news, it's reviews.
Okay,
that's a big difference.
That's a good point. But anyway, this is a big episode, guys, so we're back. We're excited to do this. This is going to be good. And hopefully this is uploaded not super late.
Yeah, ideally this would be uploaded on Thursday. We're recording this on Tuesday the 14th.
Yep.
So all these announcements, if anything drops tomorrow for some reason, which I don't think there's anything scheduled.
Yeah, but if anything does drop tomorrow,
that'll be
then
awkward.
We're sorry.
Yeah.
But you can still watch because it's still fun to listen to rumors when you already know the results.
Tomorrow would be yesterday.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yes. Okay,
so the first topic is a huge one. Turing was announced by NVidia.
Yeah.
So
the architecture... Not
the person.
Not the person. They didn't bring him back to life. And also not the GPUs. Just Turing itself was announced. Well, not the gaming GPUs.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously.
So let's go through this. So this was announced at
yeah.
SIGGRAPH, which is not a gaming event, which is why we didn't see gaming cards.
Yeah, there'd be no reason for them to announce it here.
But what they announced was their new lineup of Quadro RTX cards. Now, just quick things for anyone that doesn't know. RTX is NVIDIA's ray tracing naming. So ray tracing is a huge focus of these cards, which is why it's in the name. So essentially what we have three different cards. We have the RTX 5000, which is closest to what we're going to see consumer cards. This could be something equivalent to a Titan.
Yeah, but potentially probably
also,
with some of the aspects removed, probably not a bunch of tensor cores.
Yeah, I think the tensor cores will be removed. Everything else will likely be the same.
Yeah.
What we're looking at
maybe not 16 gigs of RAM, but we'll see. That depends.
I'm thinking if we have a couple $1,000 Titan.
Yeah,
since this is a $2,300 card.
Well, it's a $2,300 Quadro, so the Titan would probably be $1,500, not $2,000.
Depends. But yeah, it just depends on how much the tensor cores cost, most likely. But what we have,
their profit margins are also a lot higher on Quadro because they know that companies are gonna they're gonna have the money because they're going against big companies that are purchasing these, or B, they're gonna be buying so much bulk that they're gonna give them a big discount anyway. So
what we have for the 5000 is 3072 CUDA cores, 384 tensor cores, and then 16 gigs of RAM. The Quadro RTX 6000 is $6,300. That one has 4608 CUDA cores and 576 tensor cores. And
VRAM's getting big, dude.
4 gigabytes of VRAM.
Yeah.
The Quadro RTX 8000 is the same in CUDA and tensor cores as the 6, just with 48 gigabytes of VRAM.
That's so much video
Yeah.
RAM.
And so if you're using
That's
two of these...
almost enough video RAM for all my Chrome tabs.
Yeah. Almost.
It's getting there.
If you're using two of these for bigger projects, because you can do the link between them, you're looking at 96 gigabytes of memory, of video memory.
Yep, which is kind of insane.
Yeah. Now, these chips are rated at 300 watts of TDP, with 30 of that being dedicated to USB controller, meaning VR link.
Yeah, exactly. And 300 watts realistically isn't that ridiculous for this. I mean, it's going to be, it's going to be a hot card, but that's kind of what we expect is either NVIDIA is going to be releasing new architectures that are either going to be massive, thermal changes in terms of thermal output and performance per watt, or they're going to be very similar in terms of heat output and the things like that, but better performance and new features. And it looks like they're going with the latter this time around, right?
Yeah.
So...
some other things they announced with this. So there's this new thing. Again, this is all for video editing and animation, not for gaming. Especially this because it's going to add more render time to each frame. DLAA, it's a new type of anti-aliasing. It's actually like a post anti-aliasing, like a post-process.
Yeah, it's
in a way.
interesting.
So the way that it's designed to work, it's going to utilize the tensor cores to do machine learning based AA. So initially it's going to suck. Presumably companies will have to train it for their software. because that's how machine learning works. But it would take an already anti-aliased image and then try and make it even smoother.
Yeah, so this is interesting looking, and I'm excited to see what the results actually are, but I am a little bit worried that there's a lot of marketing hype behind this in particular, just because, they're using all the key buzzwords, of course, to make it sound like it's an amazing thing, but I have a feeling it's not going to make as big of a difference as we want it to, or as they claim it is.
Yes and no. I think it'll really depend on the software that's being used on it and how it's trained.
Yeah.
That's going to be the big thing. They didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. It was like, here's this thing.
Well, they more so also, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the anti-aliasing, from my understanding, is they were essentially talking about rendering the anti-aliasing at a lower resolution and using AI to make it look equally as good.
Yeah.
And
that was
so,
one option.
Right, and that was the thing they talked about more so than just better anti-aliasing
and
in
that
general.
Would definitely require a lot of training and time to get that going.
Yes. Now, I can understand in some ways why that might be possible to use AI and deep learning to figure that sort of thing out. But I guess my concern is I feel like rendering it at a lower resolution and then using AI to smooth it out is too much work for the performance benefit that you're likely to get from some sort of thing, from that sort of thing. And I feel like that just using higher res AA is going to do just as good of a job.
It could very much depend on the project, though, because, again, a lot of these cards are focused on real-time ray tracing.
Yes.
And so when you're talking real-time, if rendering it at a lower resolution saves enough time
to actually
when taking into account
the
extra AA, it puts it into real time at a good frame rate. You're doing something. I could see use cases for this for test projects, for simulation, things like that, where this could be helpful.
I don't think this is going to be something we're going to see huge in games, at least not for a while, if ever. Yeah. So, obviously, people need to keep that in mind, too, because for whatever reason, when I initially was watching part of this presentation, I thought he was talking about gaming, and I was like, I corrected myself, but I'm like, that's kind of the immediate assumption when you hear anti-aliasing coming from more of the consumer gaming side of things in terms of graphics cards, and then it's like, that doesn't sound like a good idea for games, but for something different, in terms of a production environment, it might make a big difference. So.
For the time being, it's safe to say that most of the machine learning and AI hype that we see from NVIDIA will stay off of the gaming cards, because I doubt they're going to bring tensor cores to gaming cards anytime soon.
And the tensor cores are the purpose of them is AI.
Yeah.
So.
There could be a use for them much later down the line, but the biggest problem with that is that, you can use them for things like rendering like this, but some of the biggest places that tensor cores could be utilized in would be like in-game AI processing at a whole new level.
Right,
but you can't do that unless everyone that's playing the game has the card.
Right, because the current game AI just runs on CPU anyway. Yeah. So the problem is, you'd have to have a lot of users having the card to even convince developers to actually potentially do that.
Significant
because
change.
They have to make such a huge change of moving the AI over. And now, of course, that would be great in a lot of cases for CPU bottlenecks, which is something that's becoming more and more of a problem as we see higher-end and higher-end GPUs. And CPUs are not keeping up in terms of single core performance, and devs are being stupid and not optimizing for multiple cores very well.
Yeah.
And so we keep running into these situations where it's like, sure, now we have 16 core processors and stuff like that, and 18 core processors that are good performance, but if the game can't utilize a good portion of that, your frame rates are going to suck, and removing the AI from that could remove an entire massive portion of the bottleneck via CPU. And I don't see CPU clock speed scaling up much higher anytime soon. The clear, obviously, over the last couple of, the last 2 years, we've kind of started to learn that the clear direction the industry is going is more cores, right? So,
I think that when it comes to tensor cores and gaming, while it's unlikely that consoles would adopt them first because of cost specifically, I think that they would actually be better served there first, because first party titles are already made around that hardware, so they could take advantage of that much easier. And then also, that would immediately be the adoption needed to make it worthwhile on PC. So I think that if AMD wanted to make a push for tensor cores in gaming, then they could do like a next-gen simultaneous launch of consoles and consumer hardware.
They could,
and then that gets the devs there.
That could, that would be a really big push for the devs.
It would take a move like that.
See, that's something
NVIDIA couldn't do.
And I think that's something people miss fairly frequently, is people miss that the hardware vendors make the big decisions in the industry in a lot of cases by pushing things further forward. And as we've more recently seen with AMD coming around with Ryzen having a lot of cores and now Intel following after with more cores, because Intel has to compete, right? When you run into a situation where you have all these extra available cores now, and it's something that gamers are buying frequently, that helps pull the devs towards optimizing in that direction, rather than trying to get the most they can out of 1 or 2 cores, which is what is a more common setup on most people's PCs.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with things like Tensor Cores, is the hardware vendors are going to help make and push the big decisions in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tensor Cores also, I just want to clarify this for anybody that doesn't understand, they are not an NVIDIA-specific thing.
Oh, no.
So that's something that's important, I think, because people hear CUDA cores, and that's an NVIDIA-specific thing, and those aren't even really cores. Tensor Cores are something very different.
Yeah. Google has some of the best Tensor Cores in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And they're designed for very, very specific calculations.
It's just like an ASIC card for Bitcoin mining.
Exactly. And without getting into too much detail, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And they're great for AI because that's all they do.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they're tuned for, so to speak.
A couple other things real quick about the confirmed stuff for Turing. There's some cool stuff involving hybrid rendering, so they mix rasterization, which is the normal form of
rasterization,
rendering.
yeah, exactly.
And then ray tracing, which is the new focus, along with standard compute, and then also AI for things like DLAA, in order to get you much higher quality images rendered fast enough that they could be real time, because they can dynamically
That's their big focus
change.
here is real time. Real time is something that's extremely important to them. And so, depending on the scene, if you benefit a lot from using ray tracing over like rasterization, they can use that.
Yeah.
But they can dynamically adjust it according to your scene.
Yeah.
It ends up being a really complicated set when you have that many different lighting techniques applied. But
if the software, so like let's say Pixar for example, if they built out the software right for it though, what would be really cool about something like this is that, especially for the non-finalized product, they can do edits and then watch it in real time. Not do an edit, let it render for a day, and then watch it.
Yeah.
They can be doing edits and watching that clip just play out every time, like you would do a video in a like iMovie or some basic video editing program where it renders immediately.
And that's something I think people forget too is big video production industries. They very sorry about the dog, everybody. But big video production industries, they very commonly spend days, weeks, or sometimes months rendering out a movie or even a given scene, depending on how complex it is. And so being able to do more of that kind of stuff in real time. And NVIDIA has such a, what we've seen from NVIDIA more recently is rather than just treat the mainstream video card market as a monopoly, they've instead been like, we're winning in that area, so instead of putting all of our research into that area, they're putting their R&D into the higher level workstation stuff to push those industries forward. And I think that's a really good move on their part. And even though I wouldn't even say that they're that's still not their majority market. That's something that they're pushing further and further into by developing these incredible techniques because they have so much money.
Yeah, and that's why we see them, gaining so much in the stock market and doing so well, is because they're spreading to new industries.
Yeah, exactly. They're going out rather than just growing and monopolizing.
They're kind of building more market.
Yeah, and I'm totally cool with it because obviously I don't want monopolization to happen, and NVIDIA in some areas has monopolization at this point, but at least so far we haven't seen too many things from them pointing towards acting as a monopoly, whereas we've seen a lot of that come off of Intel, which is part of why they have such good quarterlies all the time. Whereas NVIDIA seems to be actually trying to branch out into new markets, push things forward, and that's something that I have a little bit of respect for a company that is willing to push things like that, despite the lack of competition or even areas that don't exist yet.
Yeah, like let's look at consoles. I mean, all of this type of thing is why we saw them give up or just get out of the bidding for the Xbox and PlayStation. They let AMD have that, but then they chose to do something for the Switch because that was something
that was an area that they were focusing on too.
Hardware.
Yes.
And so they opted out of the console industry. They didn't say, "Hey, we're better. We can, we have all this software that can be utilized. Let's try and force our way in." They said, "Nah."
Yeah, there's a pile of reasons why they did that. But All right, let's finish up though. Yeah, with these fun
couple other
Turing
things.
stuff. Yeah.
So that's it for the confirmed stuff. The cards are focused on video and animation. DirectX and Vulkan support obviously for RTX, so it's not like a proprietary thing or specific to only like certain engines.
Yeah,
it's
no, it's probably
DirectX
specific to NVIDIA's hardware, right?
Yeah.
It probably always will be, but AMD does have their own ray tracing technology now as well. I do find it funny that they're naming things RTX now because it's like, the RTX is the name of the technology, and now we also have that as the name of the GPUs, and I think that could confuse some people. I'm not saying I'm against the name. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But I think that some people might get confused by that.
I would agree, but I actually think it's going to be, for most people, easier. Like, let's say we had GTX cards, but then only as the rumor we'll get into, I'll just get into it right now.
Yeah.
Rumor is right now that in the gaming side, it'll be the GTX 2060 and 2050, but then for the 2070... 2080 and Titan, it'll be RTX, not GTX.
Yeah.
This, part of the reason that it sounds like they're doing this is that the 7080 and Titan will have the actual RTX rendering tech, the actual physical, dedicated ray tracing hardware.
Yeah.
And so if you had them all be GTX, but then just had some of the cards be ray tracing enabled,
then that would be confusing.
That's
people.
even harder for people to figure out what they're buying. If you have RTX 2080 and 2070, they already are used to the 80 and 70 numbering schemes, so they generally know, here's the tiering.
But they understand
They see the TX, they
yeah.
understand the X, especially within NVIDIA's naming scheme, has always been the higher end stuff.
And it's generally applied to the gaming side. So
And so RTX, people, especially as NVIDIA starts their consumer-focused marketing push and puts these names out there, it will be easier for people to figure out.
Right. And so I don't know. I think people will figure it out, but I guess when it comes down to that point of only certain cards having the ray tracing tech, that tells me that while it's really cool, I don't think that's going to be any incentive for devs to push the industry in that direction. Because if ray tracing isn't very good on the 2060 and 2050, and say the 2060 and 2050 are like, the Pascal's higher end chips.
I assume that ray tracing will just not be there.
Like at all on those chips?
Like, they will work, but
right,
no dev will enable it.
Yeah, what I'm saying is what I mean is why would a dev use ray tracing and spend time for ray tracing for 2 cards out of the market? And mind you,
70 series is generally one of the most popular.
The 60
cards.
is the most popular though, by a pretty good margin. And of course, it depends on pricing. But if pricing goes up, not down, for a given SKU, so if the 2060 is, let's say, $500, then that's going to be making the 2050 is going to be the common card. The common price market for most gamers is between $200 and $400, what they can afford, right? And so even though obviously like there's not very many users of the 1080 Ti right now, and there's a lot of the 1070 in comparison, the 1060 swamps everything.
Yeah.
And so I guess my concern would be if they have literally less than 50% of NVIDIA's 70% share of the market for using these cards, I don't see as a dev why I would go after that. That's like 20% of the market. And
for the same reason that devs focus on, ultra high quality graphics, 4K, really high refresh rate.
But a lot of that stuff is just pushing technologies that already exist further. So pushing the resolutions further, pushing the a given amount of objects in a scene further, and other aspects like that. There, more shaders being applied and stuff like that. And those are situations they can scale that without having to do a ton of work.
This is something though that seems to excite the industry. I mean, the way that we're seeing, Unreal Engine so immediately, like their engine is already ready to go for this.
Yeah.
And the announcement where we found out about that wasn't even the gaming announcement. They're just like, we're happy for this.
Yeah.
The same thing with EA is already working on some stuff for it. Microsoft's already got some stuff for it. This is something that NVIDIA probably knows that devs want.
And it is a very cool technology.
It's going to be good. But if you're releasing a consumer, like mainstream card, like a 60 series, as this big new thing with ray tracing, you've got to have the software already there.
And you've also got to have the pricing to a point that makes sense.
And so if they can get some software support now, get devs used to it, learn how to do it right, and then, let's say 2-3 years from now, have the 60 series have the ray tracing
Okay,
tech.
I'll give you that. And you know what I would suspect too with the rumored lineup that we have here? I would suspect there's going to be an open slot for a 2060 Ti.
Mm-hmm.
Because my speculation, if it is really this naming scheme is correct, and the 2070 is where the ray tracing tech starts, there's going to be a big price gap between 2060 and 2070.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at $700 versus $350.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that price gap, there's room for like a really high core count 2060 Ti or something.
Or maybe like an RTX 2065.
Yes, that would be an option to a lower end RTX card. So I guess I can see on that aspect that they might move in this direction specifically to help get industry adoption.
Yeah.
And of course, lighting is one of the most important things regarding game quality and visuals. Lighting, I don't think totally understand how important that is.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with like HDR, is people can very easily wrap their brain around 4K and why that's better, but wrapping your brain around how important and how incredible HDR is when you actually see it in proper form, mind you, not 350 nits or something like that, the difference that it makes is massive. And so lighting is a really, really important aspect of the realism of the graphics, but also other aspects of it too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could see this maybe pushing the industry forward, or at least getting a start. You know, and all in all, it's the engines that have to adapt, not so much the game devs. They can enable those features.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, we already have one of the most important engines. Supporting it. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't build it, they will never build the software.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, that the hardware industry does push the software industry forward in terms of what they're able to do. Is if the hardware's not there, you're not going to plan for future hardware. You're going to plan for current hardware. Yeah. So, and it's the same reason that high core count CPUs aren't used very frequently. So everybody, jumping into the next section we have here of our fun news, the other huge thing. Obviously, we just went over all the NVIDIA Turing stuff, but AMD did some fun stuff. So we all knew that Threadripper 2 was coming. I think we already talked about this a little bit, but if we hadn't, we all knew Threadripper 2 was coming. AMD announced it, and they announced some of the specifications regarding Threadripper 2 and the SKUs that would be available, but we didn't know everything up until a few days ago. We knew like pricing, clock speeds, naming schemes, stuff like that. But then, of course, today, yesterday technically, the 13th, today's the 14th.
So 3 days ago from when you're watching this.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, you know what? I'm used to live, okay? So, anyway, Threadripper 2 reviews are interesting and potentially disappointing, but not in the way people thought, and also maybe pointing towards the future being awesome, but right now kind of sucking, depending on what market you're in.
Could be another, like we mentioned with Turing, they, you have to build it before they come.
Yes, and it also has become, like, we'll get into this in a moment, obviously, but potentially, such complex, high-level stuff, and this is making it actually really hard on the reviewers for many, many reasons. So there's a lot, like, none of the initial reviews really went into depth in the way people should regarding these CPUs because there's so many cores. So to do a quick spec rundown and SKU rundown, because I don't think we did that in last WordCast since that was just from the announcements, right? So we're looking at the 2920X, which is going to be the 12-core, 24-thread. It replaces the 1920X. It's max turbo of 4.3 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz base frequency for $650, mind you. So that's really, really, really cheap when you can consider you can get 12 cores versus Intel has a 6-core for $420 right now. So it's like that is a massive jump in core count. And 180 watt TDP, just like last year. Then we also have the 2950X, which is the replacement for the 1950X, of course. 16 cores, 32 threads. A max turbo of 4.4 gigahertz, which is ridiculously high for Ryzen. Now keep in mind these chips are specifically binned for Threadripper. They're the better of the Ryzen chips because they're specifically binned to be the best of the best chips, and so that's part of why they're able to push these clock speeds pretty high with it. 3.5 gigahertz base, $899, so $100 cheaper than the 1950X, and 180 watt TDP. Now we jump into the next series, which is the WX series, the 2970WX, which is a 24-core, 48-thread monster with 4 dies instead of 2 dies like the standard X series. 4 CPU dies, more on that later. Max turbo 4.2 gigahertz with a 3.0 gigahertz base. It's $1,300 and has a 250 watt TDP, although that is conservative, but of course TDP doesn't really tell us anything at this point. And then there's the 2990 WX, which is the 32 core, 64 thread, again 4 die monster of a chip. Its max turbo of 4.2 gigahertz and its base of 3.0 gigahertz, again $1,800, and it is a 250 watt TDP. So let's get this straight. You can get a 32 core from AMD for $200 less than you can get the 18 core from Intel. So, but to get into the more important stuff that we've learned more recently about this and the reviews, I'll get into performance here in a moment, but to go over some of the technologies, which is really in a lot of ways the more important thing to grasp from this. So we have 4 dies in the WX series instead of the 2 dies like we had in the previous Threadripper series and also in the X series, the 2950X and the 2920X. And what this means is, people that maybe understand the architecture, with old gen Threadripper, you basically had 2 dies, and each die had 32 PCI Express lanes and also 2 memory channels. And so you had quad channel memory total, and you had 64 PCI Express lanes. Now, obviously, with the way motherboards are laid out and AMD promising to stick with sockets, which this right here actually shows you guys that AMD, they are specifically designing things to stay with sockets, despite them being able to make things better if they release a new platform, because they understand that that's important to people and that's something they promised and they're sticking to it. Is you still only have 64 PCI Express lanes and quad channel memory, which means that the other 2 extra dies, they have no PCI Express or memory controllers directly on them, direct access to any of those. So people were speculating at first, well, why don't they make it so that each die has 16 PCI lanes and 1 channel of memory? And the problem with that is that would require changes in the way the pins are laid out on motherboards. So they could have done that even with the same pin layout physically like they have on Epic, but the motherboards wouldn't function with it. And then you'd be limited on the boards that aren't newer boards. You'd only have 2 memory controllers with 32 PCIe lanes, which would be shit. That's not the point of Threadripper.
Yeah.
So they purposefully did changes to make this function. And what's important here is each die is connected to the 3 other dies through its own Infinity Fabric link. So with previous Threadripper, you have 2 dies, and you would have a single Infinity Fabric link between either die. If die 1 needed access to whatever was on die 0 in terms of memory or in terms of PCI Express lanes, it would go over the Infinity Fabric link. It adds a small amount of latency, but not enough to really make a huge difference in most circumstances. You just want to make sure that you do have memory connected to both, because games don't like to run across Infinity Fabric, which is very important to note here. For example, if you only had, let's say, 2 memory channels being populated, but they were all on 1 die with old Threadripper, if the game was running on the die that wasn't directly connected, you'd have stutter, you'd have at the bare minimum lower frame rates, and sometimes like just weird quirky things happening. And so you want the game that's being played on to have direct access to either to memory or to only have to go over the small Infinity Fabric link between CCXs. That is low enough latency, games don't really care about that too much. It's when you're going inter-die that becomes a really big latency change. Again, each die, though, does have access through Infinity Fabric to the other die. And that is important to note here, is that the dies that don't have direct memory or PCIe access have to go over an Infinity Fabric link to go and connect through to your memory or to your PCIe lanes, which adds latency. And more on that when we get to the performance section.
Does this at all affect Infinity Fabric performance? Because I know that Infinity Fabric is memory tied in a way. And so if there's 2 dies that aren't connected to the memory at all, well, what if those 2 dies need to
As far as I understand, and nobody's really reported on this directly yet because the architecture is still kind of complicated and hard to understand, the clock of the Infinity Fabric, so to speak, and the available bandwidth is still tied into memory, even on the dies that are not directly connected to memory. So all the Infinity Fabric follows, from my understanding, under the exact same performance specification. Okay. So your RAM still determines it, and so you should try and get faster RAM, like 3200 megahertz is generally the recommended starting point. That will make a big difference in gaming performance and stuff like that. And that helps mitigate some of this stuff. So, very, very good question. All right, so I want to get into some of the new technologies before we get into performance, which will kind of loop back to the Infinity Fabric latency issues there, because that is something very, very important to keep in mind. There's a lot of complicated stuff going on there. But to get into a few new technologies, so we now have Precision Boost 2 instead of Precision Boost 1. It is a very, very, very good version of a boost technology from AMD. They're doing incredible stuff, and I feel like at this point, AMD's boost algorithms have already surpassed Intel in terms of high-end stuff. I don't think that they are anywhere close to Intel in terms of really low-power mobile stuff, where Intel is able to clock so low and then clock back up so high so rapidly. But Intel commonly uses what are called lookup tables, and basically for a given like temperature and a given amount of like TDP limit, it'll clock at a certain speed.
Yeah.
And what AMD is doing here is they are dynamically changing the clock speed according to the power and the current available to the chip, rather than a lookup table. And this actually allows you get dynamic scaling depending on the binning of your chip.
Yeah.
So if you get a better chip by chance, which we all know the silicon lottery, right? You might get a better chip and like, oh, some chips overclock better than others. This will help push some of that for you so that you are getting higher clock speeds regardless you'll get higher clock speeds if you get a better bench chip. And XFR2 plays even more into that. So extended frequency range, which was the original version on the old Ryzen stuff, and a lot of this we know already from the new Ryzen stuff exists, but it's a really, really big effect on Threadripper. XFR2 works in conjunction with Precision Boost 2, and it takes thermals into account alongside the other stuff to push the clocks even further beyond that. And so the CPUs can use more power. They're actually allocated to use more power if the board and everything is capable of delivering that kind of power. And this pushes clocks even higher, up to 200 megahertz higher, which is a really, really big difference when you're looking at these chips already have a boost frequency of 4.4 gigahertz, right? Or in some cases, or 4.2 in terms of like the 32 core. And so really, really, really interesting stuff. AMD is claiming up to 10% more performance thanks to XFR. Of course, that's in the best binning, highest end cases scenario. What's really important here, though, is this last one, PBO, or Precision Boost Overdrive, which is a really, really big deal. So essentially, this is like the first good auto overclocking feature that we've seen, and that's mostly thanks to because it's from AMD and not from some motherboard manufacturer.
And because it's
trying
actual overclocking.
Exactly. Like,
with motherboard overclocking, sometimes we get actual overclocking just done poorly. But
they usually just use too much voltage or whatever.
Like Intel hardware or previous AMD stuff, it's not really. It's barely overclocking.
Yeah, it doesn't even really count. Like they'll go over. Exactly, they'll go over, like in some cases, the given power allocation, but they're not going to be pushing voltages and stuff higher to achieve those clock speeds.
This is so much so actual overclocking that if this specifically hurts your chip, then it's out of warranty.
Yes, exactly. Turning on PBO and then having that damage your chip, that voids your warranty. Of course, having PBO on and your chip just dying for some other reason is still covered under warranty. And we all know AMD tends to be kind of lenient with that kind of stuff, and they just put things like this in their warranty policies to protect themselves, so that if something catastrophic goes wrong, where like some given board PBO is killing chips like crazy, they don't have to replace a bunch of chips and cost a bunch of money, especially on high-end stuff. I understand it.
I do wish that they offered overclock protection like Intel does.
I do think that's something.
You spend a certain amount of money and you get a guarantee that if overclocking breaks, especially with something like PBO, which is built in, then you know you're not screwed. Yeah,
I think that's something they should implement, and it can even be expensive. Like the 32 core, I mean, it could be like $250, you know, or $200. So it makes that a $2,000 chip, but you don't ever have to worry about it. If something goes wrong, AMD will get you covered, right? And so that's something that I'd like, because generally, Intel's done that, and I can almost guarantee you this, and obviously this is speculation, but I can almost guarantee you they've made a lot more money than it's cost them.
Insurance is profitable.
It is. Insurance is very profitable. So AMD, if you're listening, please do that. So what Precision Boost Overdrive does is it uses thermal and electrical current along with power to determine if pushing clocks further is possible. And that sounds kind of just like Precision Boost 2 and XFR2, but it goes further than that, where it's capable of drawing substantially more power, increasing voltage and other stuff like that, up to a, not like necessarily a hard limit, but what's actually like available to you.
Yeah, so if your chip is capable of, 5 somehow magically.
Right, which we know won't happen.
Yeah,
but if it
but
is...
as a hypothetical. If it was able to hit 5 based on your cooling and everything, it would just do it.
So what's really important here, guys, though, about Precision Boost Overdrive isn't just that it can push your chip further, and by doing a manual overclock, you'll sometimes get an all-core boost or an all-core max frequency that is higher, but Precision Boost Overdrive keeps Precision Boost 2 and Extended Frequency Range 2 working. And so you still get the really, really important benefits, because we've ran into issues recently to kind of backpedal a little bit and explain what the advantage here is we've ran into issues more recently where overclocking is actually a deduction in certain tasks, because you can't overclock. We have such high core count chips that you can't overclock as high as your single core boost frequency would be. When we had quad core and even 6 core chips for the most part, and some cases 8 core chips, you could push the overclock just as high or higher than the single core boost frequency. Yeah. But we're running into things now where you have so many cores and you have such a high chance of a given core not being able to hit a certain frequency and stuff, that being able to push all the cores to a really high frequency is oftentimes still quite a bit lower than your single core, or even in some of these cases like your quad core or your 8 core boost speed. Yeah. Right? It's funny we're saying your 8 core boost speed, but it's great. So what this allows you to do is you still get the single core really high performance and the middle core usage high performance. So you'll have 4 cores or 8 cores clocking to like 4.2 or 4 gigahertz or whatever's available, which is going to get you better performance in game and also get you better performance in tasks that are only capable of using 8 or 12 cores, such as like a lot of Adobe's applications can't use all your cores. So that's really, really important technology there, and I'm excited to see what direction this goes in the end. This is really interesting, but there still has to be a lot more testing done. Like I said, this is all based on reviews that came out yesterday, so there hasn't been enough testing. In fact, when I was reading through some of the reviews yesterday, I think it was Anintech is still writing their reviews. So like half their pages are actually saying still writing on them. So, all right, so let's jump into performance, and this the first section here is actually pretty quick. This is the performance regarding the 2 die chips, the 2950X and the 2920X. Super solid, a lot better than the 19 series, but still similar in terms of like general performance and what kind of issues you might run into with certain games and stuff like that. So basically, any problems you heard about regarding like the 19 series, if like a game doesn't launch or something, if that game hasn't been fixed on the 19 series, it's going to have the same issues here on the 29 series. But generally like 5 to 10% faster, and we're actually seeing that AMD is in the HEDT space is closing up on or even surpassing Intel in terms of performance, and that is really, really important, and that's including performance scaling even in some cases with only a few cores. So we're seeing gaming performance really, really, really getting close to Intel's high-end desktop, which is very, very good, because this is like probably the most realistically competitive market for AMD right now, despite Ryzen being more mainstream. Bulk is really important. Those Intel still is technically winning in the terms of the gaming performance, right? Yeah. But here we're seeing HEDT be getting really, really, really neck and neck here, and you still get a better value with AMD as you do across the board with their CPUs. Yeah. So this is really awesome, but to get, like I said, that would be quick, because mostly it's just you can estimate 5 to 10% better performance than the 19 series. So, now to get into the 4 die chips and the performance of the 4 die chips. And I know this is getting a little long, guys, but this is obviously pretty complex new stuff and pretty interesting, at least to me. So the 2970WX and the 2990WX. There's a lot of really interesting things happening here. So like I had mentioned previously, going back to what I was talking about as the increased latency by doing inter-die Infinity Fabric exchanges is causing issues. And so there's games and other latency-oriented applications have been having some serious performance issues on the 4-die layouts. Some games won't launch at all. They literally will just crash. And that actually did happen with the 16-core 1950X when it first came out. Yeah. There were some games that literally just wouldn't launch. And so that's something that has to be fixed. That might just be related to the massive amount of cores. That might not be a latency-specific thing. But other games that are launching, we're seeing like Total War or something or other is having huge issues where like we're talking 5 to 10 frames per second. It's really bad, right? And that's obviously something that the devs are going to have to fix, but there's more that plays into that. So first off, we need the industry to do more testing regarding Windows process affinity, because the speculation is that the gaming performance side of things, not the application performance so much, but mostly the gaming performance, is related to if the game is running on a die that does not have direct memory and direct PCIe access and is going across Infinity Fabric, that's causing serious latency problems, which I've been able to duplicate back when I was running a single or dual channel RAM on one die on my 1950X. If I ran a game on the other die, I'd have serious issues sometimes, especially if the directly connected die is under any kind of load. And so that's likely what's happening here is basically the game is being run at least, and especially if the game, say it's a quad-core optimized game, and 2 cores are running on a directly connected die, and the other 2 cores are running on a non-directly connected,
that's gonna be bad.
that's just going to break everything.
Now, I have a question.
Yeah.
Would AMD be able to, based on what you know, develop some kind of software that would allow you to like pick and choose apps, and it would like force it into like a game mode that would force them onto one die so that we don't run into this issue where instead of having to wait for each and every dev to optimize for it, which is obviously going to mean that some games just never get fixed.
Yeah.
If there's a way to essentially assign executables to, or even if you have to launch them through their launcher or something like that, some way to force certain apps into like game mode so that they work.
I think that's something that they could possibly do.
Yeah.
That can be done manually right now through what I was saying is Windows Process Affinity, is you can force a given application towards a given node, and Windows can recognize those nodes. And so that's something that the industry, for whatever frickin' reason, nobody's done testing on yet, which is so frustrating because I don't have a 2990WX to test this with. But I think the games that are having problems, if you gave them 4 or 8 cores on a directly connected die, I bet you all the problems would just go away.
Yeah, because then they'd be running like they're on a normal Threadripper.
Exactly, or even in that, in depending on it, how aware Windows Scheduler is of what PCIe and in particular what memory channels are connected to that die, the game would essentially be like it's running on a 2700X, right? And so that's something that you can do manually. But the problem is, as you're saying, kind of going on the point of what you're saying there is, those applications have to be manually set. You have to pick the cores, and it has to be every time the application is launched.
Yeah.
If you don't leave it open, it loses that. Now, there is a way with command prompt to open an application with an assigned affinity, but that can cause all kinds of other problems with games that need to launch through Steam and for specific reasons and other stuff like that. So
yeah, that would be why I would want some kind of AMD utility that they could work out more kinks on and just have as part of their normal software suite available to
just
download.
Like in Ryzen Master or something, you select a program, and when that program is launched, regardless of how it's launched through Steam or whatever, if that executable is opened, it forces it to a given configuration.
Yeah. And AMD would obviously know how to run that stuff best.
Yes. So, and they could even potentially program where you just tell it, I need this game to or I need this application to always be on a directly connected die and have 4 cores, and it just throws it around between those 2 dies.
Yeah.
So that if all of a sudden another die starts working really hard, it can move it over dynamically, but never puts it on the ones that are not directly connected.
Yeah.
So that's something I'd love to see AMD dabble with more. And we also know, at least we've heard rumors that seem more like fact, that AMD is working really close with Microsoft to get Windows Scheduler to fucking understand this kind of stuff so that Windows Scheduler can actually do the right things. Because if anybody that's played around with Windows Server, which I've done quite a bit with now, is Windows Scheduler and Windows Server is so much better. And as far as I understand, I mean, it just, at least from my testing, I can't verify that they even use a different scheduler, but I'm like 99% sure they do, because why wouldn't they? Because you see massive amounts of cores in servers more than desktops, right? And it seems that processes don't hang even under like a Prime 95 load. You want to open up Explorer, you want to run remote desktop, you want to do all these other things. On server, it's just like, cool. But you do that on a desktop, and a lot of times you have serious performance issues. So I really hope some of this gets smoothed out. And so this is not just going to be a reviewers need to test harder, but also wait to test more.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons that Linux is so nice, is because AMD could just go in and fix this.
Yeah, exactly. And Linux already has less performance issues on the application side. Obviously, gaming right now in Linux, there's it's better than it's ever been, but it's not great, and there hasn't been a ton of testing done on that. But application-wise, we're seeing substantially better performance on Linux and less performance issues versus Windows. Okay, so to finish up the rest of the Threadripper stuff, though, here is we've had some there's some applications that are running into issues regarding performance as well. Like Handbrake has been having issues, and the speculation behind these different applications, where some of them are performing worse than they would on a 1950X if you just let it do its thing, is related to memory bandwidth and or memory latency. And so these applications are not working properly with it, but a lot of applications are just going to need to be updated to understand this kind of technology, because this is very different. Threadripper was already different than anything the industry had ever seen, and now we're taking another step in that direction, right?
Yeah.
So it's a massive thing. Any application, though, to get into the good sign of this, two things that are really, really, really good about the 4-die configurations. Any application that can properly use everything is stomping everything in the entire industry. There's no questions about it. There's nothing that even comes close. I mean, we're talking Cinebench stock. We're getting like 5,500 points in some cases, or a little bit lower than that, depending on if Precision Boost Overdrive's turned on and stuff. Like massive, massive stuff. And then also running, if you're manually setting core affinity, running lots of really, really, really high core count, high performance usage applications like rendering, streaming, recording, transcoding again, all this stuff simultaneously. It handles very, very, very well.
Yeah.
That's pretty much everything to go over, though, for the Threadripper content. And for whatever reason, we only have 10 minutes left to film, so we have quite a bit to get through, but the important stuff's out of the way. So let's go with Samsung Unpacked.
Yes, so Samsung had their annual event. This year they announced 3 major products. All 3 were exactly expected and exactly as rumored, so awesome. We have the Galaxy Note 9.
Yep.
No word on if they brought back the self-destruct feature from the Note 7.
I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice if they did.
Yeah.
It's a convenience thing.
The most important upgrades, at least in my opinion, the S Pen is probably the most significant. Because
finally making it useful.
Yeah, it's an actual new feature set added. So they added Bluetooth Low Energy, so that the phone can be used the S Pen can be used as a remote. So this can be used for things like taking pictures and selfies, which is pretty cool. Forward and back and slideshows. The whole press event was done on a Note 9, and it was done being controlled by an S Pen,
which that is really cool technology. I'm actually really happy that they're pushing the S Pen, because realistically, I'd play with it for 2 weeks on all the notes that I've had before, and then just go and slot it in and ignore it, right? And I'm like, I just want the bigger screen.
Now, obviously, this having Bluetooth and whatnot means that it's going to have to be charged. It charges by just being in the Note.
Yeah.
It only takes a minute to charge, less than that actually, it's like 40 seconds. And it gives you about 30 minutes of use. Even if it's dead, which I don't know how you would have this run out of battery.
You'll probably never have it run out of battery. Yeah, nobody will notice.
Even if it was dead with battery, it would still work as a normal S Pen without the charge.
Yep.
So, all in all, that's awesome.
And you can even take the S Pen out, and you can take the cap off, and it has a USB-C port for charging other devices.
No, it does not.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Oh, why not? Wouldn't like the 10 million hours help a lot?
It's just a single supercapacitor.
I know. I'm kidding. So I mean, it's a really, really cool design. Did they talk much about the waterproofing? The phone's waterproof, but I'm assuming the S Pen is on its own, not just when it's inserted.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how it's been on the previous waterproof notes. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. So some other things. The battery is awesome, 4,000 milliamp hours.
Yes.
However, the charging that they're using sucks. The quick charge that they're using compared to most other companies with similar sized batteries is so much slower.
It's probably because the battery is more compact.
Yeah, it's absurd though. It's literally like you can charge this in the time it takes you to get to 30% on this. Most phones with similar sized batteries that have been released recently are about 60%.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. But what I will say is this should at least help you in a lot of circumstances get through a full day, unless you're him. So that is I'm excited for them to finally see a battery increase, because I've been really annoyed how the Note series for the last couple generations has literally been take the Galaxy series, insert a pen, and like
it's still mostly that.
Well, I think there's quite a few changes here, though, including... So, you got the 4,000 milliamp hour battery, right? You've got a bigger screen. It's slightly bigger.
Yeah.
And it's 6.4, right?
6.3.
6.3. It's a little bit... I thought it was 6.4, but it's a little bit bigger of a screen than the mainstream, which is also really awesome. So they're finally kind of going back to their roots in some instances.
A couple other things that this has. This will probably find its way to every Samsung device. But DeX no longer requires a dedicated dock, just an HDMI dongle. DeX is their software for using your Note as a computer.
Yeah.
You can do this with the Galaxy series, the regular Galaxy S series, but it requires the dock. You can use your phone as the trackpad, Bluetooth keyboard and mouse if you want to as well. So you could just dongle, Bluetooth, you're good. I don't know how often you would need to do this. It'd be nice for like slideshows like they did.
Yeah.
For like
if you do that frequently, it'd be a good setup. Yeah. If your organization does lots of slideshows in like a room, you can have it set up so that they all have notes and just click.
Other than that, it's $1,000 for the 128 gig or $1,250 for the 512 gig.
Storage wise, 6 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM, respectively.
I think
6 gigs I don't think is enough for TouchWiz UI, honestly.
I think it's annoying that they didn't give a 64 gig option, even if it would only be $50 cheaper.
I mean, I don't mind.
They made a big deal about how it's got more storage than ever before, and you don't need to. But it costs more. It's not like it's more storage for the money.
Yeah, that's true. That's
what annoyed me very much about this.
They're still under the $1,000 price point, which is pretty impressive, though. I will say. I mean,
technically.
You know what I mean? Not like under, but they're still at, like, they're not going, they're just like the iPhone 10, right? But, and also, I wish that they'd gone with 8 gigs of RAM instead of 6, though, on that model. Because, personally, I feel like 6 gigs of RAM is what I have on my Key 2 review coming someday. And on stock Android, that keeps so much stuff open. And I'd prefer that experience on a Samsung device, but like 4 gigs of RAM feels like complete garbage on a Samsung device, right? It feels worthless. So I that kind of bugs me, but and at the same time, also with the storage, I really would like it if they would increase the speed of storage and not just the capacity, so that we can actually catch up with Apple on that front.
The one time when people don't copy Apple.
I know, I don't get it, but it's because the industry isn't talking about it.
It's because they don't want to spend the money.
And they don't want to spend the money. Yes.
So the other 2 products announced are kind of insignificant. There's the Galaxy Watch, which is in some ways an upgrade and some ways a downgrade from the Gear 3, whatever it's called. So Samsung Pay lost its best feature in that the magstripe transmission that allows you to make payments wherever, not just at places that have NFC, is gone.
This is just for the watch, right? The phone still has it, I would assume?
Yes.
Okay, which is really, really, really dumb. They bought that from a company called LoopPay. I was an early adopter, and the whole point of it was you could use it anywhere. That's what made it good.
Yeah. Well, that's not good anymore.
Now it's just dumb. Yeah.
Other than that, it uses a custom dual-core Exynos chip to help with battery life. They're claiming 4 to 6 days of battery of standard use, depending on the model.
So 2 days, maybe 3.
We just don't know if that was including screen on at all times or not. That's the big thing. Because 4 to 6 days with the screen off, I can see. With a dedicated chip, Exynos chips are already better than Qualcomm in most cases.
Yeah.
So, and it has LTE, which, whatever. We expected that. And then there was the Galaxy Home. We didn't really get many details on this. They pretty much showed it on stage. It's an AI speaker, sounds by AKG, which doesn't mean jack shit because Samsung owns that naming now, so they can just say that.
Yeah.
It also works as a SmartThing hub. So if you have this, or if you have a TV, or if you have a fridge, you have a SmartThings hub. Okay.
So
it's all shipping with, or the Note 9 shipping with Oreo, not Pi, which is also funny because they released a roadmap for software updates and it was about Oreo, not Pi. And they released it after Pi was announced.
That's ridiculous.
Yes.
That's dumb. Samsung, get it together.
It's not going to happen.
No, speaking it's not, because they have TouchWiz.
Speaking of Pi, so speaking of Android Pi, that's the name of Android 9P officially now. Google confirmed this. They released the final build, and I'll explain that in a second. But it's out on Pixels. And then Essential also announced the same day, hey, they had it ready, and it's available.
It's already out!
So the Essential phone got it day one. Samsung...
No, it's not going to happen.
Samsung doesn't even have a roadmap.
Nope.
So some important things to note. Digital well-being is not out yet fully, even though that was a key feature of Android Pie. That is coming later this year. Right now, if you have a Pixel, you can sign up for the beta. And in the beta, it's excellent. It works very well. I don't know why it's betaed right now. It works. I haven't had any bugs.
Well, it's on the Pixel. That's why it's beta. It works flawlessly on the Pixel.
Yeah, but it's beta on the Pixel. They could have just released it on the Pixel.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right now, also Slices, which is the feature that allows you to, let's say you want to take a Lyft ride home, which is the example that's just generally been used. You can search Lyft, and if you go home very often, it'll have a little quick action. You click that and it launches that action and you just confirm, rather than having to open, lift, then search home, then confirm. So it saves you some time.
Yeah, which time saving on phones I think is kind of an important thing, and it kind of goes along with the people use their phones too much. If we can make that simpler and quicker and easier, that's all really good.
And that's a key part of Android Pie,
Yeah.
is helping you use your phone more efficiently.
Yes.
So
and
all in
that's
all,
something I look forward
awesome.
to, even though I'll never get to use it.
Yeah. Speaking of efficiency, it also broke quick charging on the OG Pixel XL with an asterisk. It did not break it if you're using the official charger, which uses power delivery, which is the proper USB-C quick charging spec.
Yeah.
However, if you're using a third-party USB-C charger, it did break the quick charging. That's supposed to be fixed soon, but in reality, the moral of this whole point of the story is just use a USB power delivery charger. It's better.
And industry, start using that as well. Let's stop using Qualcomm. I'm not comfortable. I'm really annoyed with the fact that Qualcomm is such a monopoly in the U.S. on the CPU market that they can push their charging everywhere.
Which can break devices.
Yes, it's not good for devices. It's not the best form of that tech.
Yeah.
The power delivery makes a lot more sense, and I wish we would do that. And all the big charging companies in terms of like that make external chargers like Anker and stuff, they all have Qualcomm Quick Charge. And I mean, it's great because I have all these chargers laying around that use Qualcomm Quick Charge, but it's still like I don't like seeing that Qualcomm is getting a payment for every charger I buy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. It needs to be an open standard. It's a charger.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Some other big news. Discord is now a Steam competitor.
And potentially one of the first good Steam competitors out there.
Yeah,
we'll see.
They've announced a couple big things. First up, obviously, as being a Steam competitor, they're going to start selling games and using Discord as your game store and launcher. DRM, I actually tweeted at them earlier today and asked and confirmed. DRM is completely up to the devs. So they can choose a completely DRM-free option if they want.
And that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because you have no DRM-free option through Steam.
Yeah.
And
Steam
places like GOG.
Steam is a DRM along with every other DRM.
Yes, and that allows Steam to have rights to it, allows Steam to make more money, and Steam charges close to 30% is what people speculate.
Everyone
of the sales.
charges 30%.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
Apple, Microsoft,
yes.
Sony.
It's a big charge for a store, you know what I mean? And obviously GOG, they do a great job because they have all the DRM free stuff.
But they have less content because they're exclusively
DRM free.
So
a blend is the best way to go, and I haven't seen anybody do that yet.
Yeah,
so
and
this
that's
is
why
really
I wanted
exciting.
to ask them about that, because I found that to be something that could have made them different.
Yeah, exactly,
so
and it does, and it's awesome, and it's very exciting, and it's also funny. Like Steam released their new updated chat client to help compete with Discord.
Sucks.
I wouldn't say it sucks. It's just not that great.
So it sucks.
I mean, it's better than the old one by 20,000 football fields.
Going from
the worst in the industry to wait
to still garbage.
Wait. But that did they just raise the bar of the worst?
Yeah. They didn't actually
They didn't rank up. They just made their shit that was shittier than all the other shits. Mm-hmm. Still shittier than all the other shits, but not as shit as their original shit.
Yeah.
But the Discord was like, "Oh, you want to try?
Yeah.
Try me, bro."
So some other things that they announced were that Discord Nitro is getting an upgrade, not a price upgrade, just a feature upgrade, in that it's getting games as well. Now, this is going to be different.
What's Discord Nitro? I actually don't know.
Discord Nitro is their premium service that was originally more of like a donation thing.
Yeah, like Patreon type stuff.
So you got like you could send larger video files, you could send more photos, you could get custom stuff within the app, things like that. It was their way to start monetizing the platform without selling your info or ads. And this, through both the sales of games directly and the upgrades to Nitro, are ways to continue that. The big upgrade to Nitro is that you will get games with Nitro that you use. It sounds like, you won't own them. It's not like PlayStation or like, let's say, Xbox's games where you get
games
them
with gold,
to keep,
yeah.
It's like a rental, or not even that. It's just
It's a subscription to use games. It's
as
games
long
as
as
a service.
in that platform. It's like It is like Netflix essentially.
Yeah.
So as long as the game is on Discord Nitro, it's there. Once it goes away, it goes away.
And that starts in Canada first?
Yeah, so let me explain that in a second.
Yeah.
But the games that will be on Discord Nitro are different than the games that will be on the store. There can be games on Nitro that won't be on the store and vice versa.
Oh, okay.
So Nitro is kind of a unique thing. All of this stuff is starting in beta in Canada.
Which makes sense, actually, because they have less users.
Yeah. They're starting with 50,000 and then expanding from there, and then eventually will expand into the US. So all in all, it is just Discord is starting a game store and a launcher, so they're competing with Steam.
And this is really cool that Discord is doing this all in the means of they're not going to have to sell your data to make money. Now, of course, there's still going to be people that speculate, including myself, of whether or not that's ever going to happen, or whether or not, obviously if they're not disclosing it, then that's illegal, and I'm assuming they're not doing that. But, who's to say that they're collecting everything and then eventually are going to change their minds on that and deliver everybody's data in a lump sum?
They would have to do a significant... doing stuff like that's very complicated when it comes to the law because you're selling data on stuff that has already been agreed that wouldn't be sold. Is more complicated.
Yeah. So
it's not like just a simple terms and conditions and they can
do what they want with it.
They would have to be, especially since they have users in Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
GDPR would probably shut them out of business.
Yeah. So overall, though, it's like, speculation aside, Discord is looking to be a really good company.
Yeah.
And they have kind of overall proven that, I think.
They will be far more profitable from being successful at game sales than if they screw themselves by selling your data as a one-time thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not a public company, so they don't need to worry about quarterlies.
Yeah, good point. So it's like they can kind of do what they want. And I like seeing this. I mean, I still have constant problems with Discord's chat for whatever reason. I'm one of the unlucky ones. I know.
You have problems with everything that isn't a service that you tried first.
Okay, no. So, no. I like Discord a lot, but me and like 2 other people I know have consistent issues with it. There's still consistent issues with it. They've done a lot to improve it, and the recent update...
I'm not saying you don't have issues. I'm saying that from what I've noticed, if you start using
my
software,
own issues.
If you look out with Tidal, you're like, oh, this is really cool. I'm gonna start using it. I'm gonna get other people to use it. Mm-hmm. Whenever you
get other people to use it by paying for them.
Yes,
you're welcome.
Whenever you do that, you don't run into the same issues that you do if somebody tells you, hey, you should try this software. I really like it.
Okay, so that depends. I've used Discord extensively, though.
No, I know.
So, yeah. So, I know, you're right. I do have legit issues in this situation. But also, like, there is that first judgment where, like, I'll try an app that somebody suggests, like a different Twitter app. And instead of using it for a month, I make the initial judgment. Yeah, right. Or that. But that's not something that I do for an actual review, right? And, I test things for longer and spend more time on things when there's an actual review. But also in the case of Discord is I have used it very extensively, and I still use it extensively for the people that won't use TeamSpeak, because I host TeamSpeak. You can say what you want. The UI is getting redesigned, and quality and latency is better regardless. But, that's what I use with some people. Factually, don't do this, factually. But anyway, no, but I mean, I use the service that people want to use. I try to ask people to try out TeamSpeak because it's better, but if they don't, that's fine. But Discord, I have ran into weird application issues. I've had issues with it. It literally being open on the login screen on this laptop consumed 30% of this laptop's battery life one day. Never did it again. Just one day it was like, I'm going to suck all your battery life.
Maybe it was Windows causing it to run for some reason with their process.
It could have been. Or
broken.
It could be that, or it could have been that something was going on with Discord where it was requesting just enough CPU cycles to trick Windows into keeping my CPU clocked at like 3.8 gigahertz.
Yeah, they could sell your data.
Yeah! So anyway, I wasn't logged in, but anyway. So this next one's really sad.
Yeah, so Case Labs is closing down. Now let's explain this
officially, and they are closed. Like it's done, guys.
They are filling accessory orders that were already placed and the case orders that they were pretty much done with, but everyone else
thank you so much, Case Labs, first, for what you've done for the industry, but second, for the understanding of how important continued accessory support is. Mm-hmm. They've continued to make accessories for case lines that they haven't sold in years. Mm-hmm. They make every accessory for it, or made, sad to say, every accessory for it, because they understand that it's really important. People are spending so much money on these cases because of the long-term support.
So let's explain this. So important things to note: Case Labs was already in debt. You don't close down because of something that happened within a couple months.
They were in a lot of debt, and they never had huge profit margins. People thought they did, but it's obvious by this that they didn't. Yeah. Making cases like that, especially in America, is extremely expensive, and it's a bunch of enthusiasts and friends. I'm sure they're paid well, right? So it's like, it's not cheap.
And they only sold roughly 20,000 units based off of what they said, because they
total
said,
all time, right?
There was 20,000 of you talking about their customers. Yeah. Well, if you've only had 20,000 customers, then you didn't have volume, which means, and if your margins weren't amazing and you didn't have volume,
and they didn't have volume because they're so expensive, right? And so there's like, I was talking to some people online that were like, oh, this is so sad, like I've always been looking into getting one of these. And I'm like, that's exactly the problem. Everybody's always been looking into getting one of these, but nobody goes through with it because of the pricing, and that's not Case Lab's fault. They're actually well priced for what they are. And I think also one of their other other faults, before we get into another reason here why, one of their other, I think, reasonings that they have failed is, I don't think they had a good enough design team. So I think one of the problems that they had is they had not very many designs. They had several designs, but they would just scale the sizing on them rather than making a whole bunch of different designs. So I think, like, for me, for example, I love their cases, but unless you're custom water cooling, they don't cater it all to you. And that limits their market really drastically when there are actually really high-level case needs. That some people need massive cases to do certain things, and really customizable cases that aren't necessarily water cooling. So now to get into another reason.
So essentially, from here, with the debt and with the amount of sales they had, and just their general position, then the tariffs came in, and that was, the thing that broke the camel's back. Essentially,
shortened how long it was going to take.
It stopped them from being able to survive,
and they wouldn't have survived long term either way.
Let me explain this, because something's important here. So when the tariffs hit, because of just general increased cost, but then also because of shortage, it upped their material costs by about 80%, which obviously cut into the little margins they had. Yeah. Which made it very difficult to work on paying down their debt. Now, they were working on trying to get a deal done that could have allowed them to last through these tariffs, last through this debt, to try and work on things and get things improved, but they couldn't do that. Now, probably a big reason is that nobody knows when these tariffs are going to end. And that's why I'm saying that, like, they might have been able to survive without this, because they would have had time to change things. They would have had time. They would have been able to more easily
but I also think they've had a long time to potentially change things.
They would have been able to more easily have a chance to secure funding to allow them to do other work, or maybe make a deal with another company. But nobody wants to buy a company. Nobody wants to buy out something with a lot of debt that is a product that is so expensive to make. Yes. Where it's made, meaning that you would either have to move where it's made, which would hurt its business, or you would have to wait for the tariffs to go away to start working, which you don't know when that's going to be. It could be 6 months. It could be 3 years. It could be 7 years from now. And so the tariffs, while not the thing that put them into a position of struggling, were the thing that made it so that they couldn't try and work on it.
Or at least so they claim. Now, one thing I want to note is that the material costs, even close to doubling in cost, I don't think that material, in my understanding of manufacturing, was the expensive part. I think the expensive part of making these cases was the labor. The machines needed to do this kind of stuff cost tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this work done.
The point of this and what they were talking about was that, as you mentioned, if their margins are low, any cut into that
is a big deal. Yes.
Upping your material cost by almost double is still a significant cut into very small margins. And that makes it very, very hard for you to go and secure financing.
Yeah, and that's true.
And
that's
especially
true. When your profit
since,
margins are looking even lower.
Especially since there are rumors that tariffs might increase. No bank is going to want to help a business that's
struggling
relies on just the materials that are being affected by the tariffs.
Because everything they do is out of aluminum.
Yes.
So
there is essentially too much uncertainty within their business to do anything other than go out of business.
Yeah.
With how much debt they had.
And it's really unfortunate that it went this way. I kind of wish that they had... there's more they could have done, I think, in the past to help prevent this, and I wish that they'd taken those steps. But, working for a lot of small companies and having family members running their own companies, I kind of understand, some risks you're just not sure if they're worth it. Right, and maybe spending a whole bunch of time and money and tooling to get new case designs that might have helped out didn't seem worth it at the time.
Yeah,
so
and they might have not been successful and not worked, and there's nothing's a guarantee when you're a small business like that. So.
Exactly, and so at this point, I think realistically, we don't have boutique case manufacturers anymore. It's the big guys making boutique cases, like the Fantex Enthoo Elite and the Corsair Obsidian 1000D. But aside from that, realistically, we don't have these really high-end brands. There's one out there called Mountain Mods, and their stuff, honestly, is old and crappy, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. So, next thing.
Yeah, other big-ish topic. NASA launched their Parker Solar Probe to touch the sun. This was actually really cool. So this launched early in the morning on August 12th, and by early, I mean like shortly after midnight our time.
Yeah.
Using the United Launch Alliance's Delta IV rocket, which is a pretty powerful rocket. It's on par with the Falcon Heavy when the Falcon Heavy's in expendable mode, and this is an expendable rocket. Yeah. So very powerful. This mission is actually pretty important for not just NASA or general science, but technology in general, which is why I wanted to talk about it. So the goal of this mission is to have the probe fly through the corona of the sun, which is like essentially the outer of the atmosphere. This testing is going to give us information on how solar winds can affect things like satellites, the magnetic field, tech on Earth. For those that don't know, solar winds, if they were extreme enough, could affect, cause power outages and blackouts. They can also cause the
solar winds could take out everything.
Yeah, the magnetic fields in around Earth could get stronger, which would then pull in satellites to Earth faster. So if they're built without the excess fuel to get out of that, then that could collapse.
Really, really
things like GPS could go down, satellite internet could go down. Yep. A lot of important infrastructure could go down if we got hit just right with solar winds. So this is a very important mission to keep society going, really.
Yeah.
And so,
especially with things like satellite internet starting to grow and become a potentially real thing. And it's kind of interesting looking at like human innovation and human, industry. Seeing us like now we're starting to potentially put like actually commercial, like every person uses it thing. I mean, GPS already is, but every person uses it stuff like beyond Earth. Yeah. Right. But like in order to keep that alive, we have to do more research.
Yes.
And this is awesome
so
that they.
The way that this mission will work is
miss the sun because.
Right? Kind of.
No, I'm kidding.
So in 6 weeks, the probe will fly by Venus and do a gravity assist that'll allow it to alter its route and somewhat slow down. And then in another 6 or so weeks, it will do its first flyby of the sun. Overall, the mission could theoretically last a lot longer. From what I was reading, it could go on for decades if things just happen to work right, but it's very unlikely that it would. The expectation is that it'll last about 7 more years. It'll do about 24 flybys of the sun, with 6 additional Venus flybys in order to slowly get closer and closer to the sun's actual surface. Something odd about the sun is that the corona is hotter than the surface. Yeah. Which is also something they need to study. They don't know why. And so by slowly getting closer to the surface, they can see the changes that the sensors can pick up, and they might be able to figure out why.
Yeah. And we don't know a lot about the sun. So it's like this is a really cool probe to be sending out because we actually know more about a lot of other planets and stuff than we do about the sun itself. Yeah. And stars in general, which obviously this will help us learn about stars. Yeah.
And what's really cool, so obviously, hardware on this satellite can't get too hot, even though it's right next to the sun. Otherwise, it would break. So they've developed a new type of heat shield. Even though the heat shield will heat up to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, The actual electronics of the probe will be able to stay at about 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which is really impressive. And that also probably means, since we know electronics can generally survive hotter temperatures than that it can survive even hotter if necessary, right? And with the inside, and it also might be a scale where it's like you get another 100 degrees here, that's a degree and a half here, right? And so you might be able to actually hit substantially higher temperatures. I don't know. I'm speculating on that.
Well, 2500 is not the temperature that the satellite will be near. It's just what the heat shield will get up to.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's really complicated, but essentially this mission was not even close to possible a decade ago. Yeah. The heat shield tech was very recent developments, and that's why they're doing this now. It's pretty much as soon as they could do it, they did, because it's so important. So yeah, we'll have to just wait. It'll be about 4 or 5 months before we start getting real updates. They're not having any of the sensors active during the Venus flyby, so we won't get any data from Venus, probably to just conserve things for the important stuff. But yeah, we'll probably do an update when there's actual, not just like they got some data, but if they find anything.
Definitely. That'll definitely end up in some of it, because we do a little bit of science here regarding not just tech, but because science is tech at this point, right?
Yeah. Other than that, we've got a couple rapid fire topics.
Really basic stuff here, guys. Just bear with us for a moment.
Something really important. The Sinclair merger failed. We had talked about this before. Sinclair was trying to merge with Tribune. Sinclair and Tribune are television channel companies. Sinclair owns a lot of local news. They were trying to buy up Tribune, which would put their total at about 76% coverage of the U.S., which is illegal.
Not good.
And they were trying to work with the FCC to bypass that. Tribune backed out of the deal, stating that if Sinclair had done things legitimately, they could have gotten the deal done sooner, and that because they were acting illegitimately and doing a lot of sketchy things, they voided the deal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise us about Sinclair, though.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's pretty big. MoviePass is, in certain circumstances, uncanceling accounts.
Yeah,
sort of.
I remember MoviePass. I never took advantage of it, but I when I started hearing about, now it's canceling, it doesn't surprise me.
No,
but...
so when I signed up, it was sign up and write it out for as long as you can while it's still good. I got my money's worth. I know that other people that did the year long for $80. Some of the people I know at my work, they've seen 100 movies. Yeah. They've well gotten their money's worth. Yeah. So that was the most important thing, is nobody really expected this to last.
Yeah.
But something that happened was if you had submitted for your account to be canceled and your account had yet to be canceled this cycle. So in my case, my account ends the 22nd because I'm canceling mine. So my account is set to be canceled the 22nd. If you open the app, it talks about some of the changes they've made, and then essentially prompts you with this button that says I agree, but it's talking about how they have a new plan. It doesn't say I'm signing up. But if you hit I agree to close the window, which is the most obvious way to get out of that, it uncancels you.
Okay.
Yeah. The only way to get out of not uncanceling is to click the small X that's a somewhat similar gray to the background.
That's weird.
It's not weird. It's manipulative, sketchy bullshit.
I guess so. So okay.
They're just trying to trick people into signing up for another month.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, MoviePass. Cancel
now. Woo! Good company now.
Also,
right. This was last thing, but this is really cool, I think.
Yeah, I'll let you go.
Okay, all right. So Spotify, popular music service, you probably haven't heard of them, but they're pretty big. They are going to start displaying songwriter and producer credits on iOS, and presumably other stuff.
Yeah, iOS is just the first platform to begin with.
This is really, really, really cool. I like seeing this because, first off, I like there being credits. And this is something Tidal has focused on really heavily, which is more of an enthusiast music platform. They have a lot of credits. Everybody that's worked on this song, they attempt to list in the credits for the song. And Spotify is copying that, which is really cool because, several reasons. First is I think it's good these people deserve credit for the work they do. But second, it also will help people be more aware of the fact that most songs in the top 20 playlists are actually written by the same guy or the same two guys. And so it's like that stuff where it's like not necessarily that that's a problem. Like it's fine if you like those musics or that song, those songs and whatever, but at least that people can be more aware of that, right? And they can be aware of who's exactly putting into it. And then they can even take things into, oh, this songwriter that wrote music for these 3 artists that I really like, right? They can look for more music by that songwriter, by other artists, and that gets other artists credit, but also is like potentially in a similar style, or you maybe you think that person's really skilled at songwriting.
Yeah.
Or producer, same thing as I just said.
And this helps hold Spotify accountable if ever things come up again that they're not paying songwriters.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, when that has come up, it's been because of issues with getting the payments out. They've always held the money. It's not like they were just profiting.
Yeah, right.
But that way, if something comes up, it actually gives songwriters and producers tools, or songwriters specifically, because there's specific regulations on how they're paid.
Yeah.
It gives them a tool to say, we know that we wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, you have that data. So you display that data.
So you need to pay us.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's it for today, guys. We are out of time here. We try and keep this close to an hour. This is a little longer than an hour, but, whatever. I'll edit what I can out of it. But, yeah, thank you everybody for watching. That was WordCast number 59. We'll hopefully be back next week for you guys. The plan is to make this a weekly thing consistently. I'll be having a channel update video coming out fairly soon for you guys, talking about some of the changes around here. But this should be staying mostly consistently. Like I said, he was sick, and that was 2 weeks that we were gone for that, and then another week was literally no time to prepare the doc that we use for this. So thank you everybody for watching.